Hello, folks. Back to this Vietnamization uh, idea. It's not original or anything, but I've just been thinking about it because, as I said, I was reading some other books about Vietnam, and I'm really concerned with all the proxy war strategies that have been implemented over many generations by the United States in particular. And this new strategic, it's not new actually, it's not at all new, but the strategic sequencing, we're going to put pressure here and then we're going to put pressure there and then we're going to, you know, how does he say his name? Brian Berletic, I don't know. Anyway, he describes it well, and in his journalism, he links to a lot of good resources that illustrate this from the horse's mouth, as it were. I mean, from the think tanks, from the intelligence agencies, from the government, from all kinds of leadership in Congress, and on and on. So it's not a mystery. Basically, the idea is to assert your dominance, to mold and shape the world the way you want it for your own advantage. This is nothing new. And so when I think about like the corrupt officials that were Catholic Vietnamese people, they 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 were friendly with the French colonialists, and colonialism is nothing new in Vietnam, Vietnamese history. It goes way back to the 15th century and so on. And, different colonial powers have been vying for control of Indochina, China, Japan, India, all these regions in Africa and so on, for a long time, for hundreds of years. And before that, we had conflict between kingdoms in Mesopotamia and whatever. All that history. It's fascinating. But you have one coup after another. The United States gets involved in Vietnam in 1955. And as it escalates, goes up the escalation ladder or whatever, Indica says that we get to a point where we're going down the ladder to luxury terrorism because we can no longer really use war as a means of power and diplomacy, and politics by any other name, blah, 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 because we're weak. So we resort to terrorism. We support and back terrorists. We bomb civilians and back terrorist acts, whether you're thinking about blowing up pipelines or blowing up cars in Moscow or whatever. Eventually, it all becomes terrorism. The whole complex history of the U.S. involvement in Ukraine, and it goes back a long way to the 50s and before, and all the way back to World War One, actually. And the anyway, it's just never ending. And so anyway, what is Vietnamization? In case you don't know, it was the policy of the Nixon administration that they wanted to shift the burden of the Vietnamese War from U.S. troops to the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the ARVN. So this would allow the United States to gradually withdraw from Vietnam and so on. So this was called the Nixon Doctrine, and the idea is to shift the burden to your local allies, your proxies, the corrupt people who are taking your money to to help them acquire power. These people aren't saints. They're politicians, wealthy families, and they may say they want independence for their country, but they're working in league with the colonial masters and so on and so forth. Some people beg to differ, and usually the colonial powers are more powerful, so they just kill everybody. You see it in Indonesia, Central America, South America, Africa, all over the world. And so there's this parallel between this idea of the Nixon doctrine and Vietnamization and proxy wars. And it's all over the place, And we want to meditate on what the result of that was. Obviously, people got killed. Agent Orange, the pollution, the disease, the trauma, it's still there in Vietnam to this day. It's in the hearts and minds of the American Vietnam veteran and so on. It doesn't go away. And the legacy of this Gaza mayhem and Middle Eastern mayhem will be around for generations. It's not that easy to clean it all up. People are still trying to get rid of landmines all over the place and various kinds of munitions that litter the world. And obviously somebody makes money off of this. It's a business model. So, but it's not you, it's not me. The civilians always get crushed, as I say. And somehow, no matter how educated and aware of these things we are, we feel powerless to do anything about it. If you're passionate about your cause, if you're a North Vietnamese soldier and are passionate about your cause, you will sacrifice everything. And they did. So the policy evolved in response to increasing domestic anti-war sentiment, high U.S. casualties, and the recognition that the conventional military victory was unlikely. So they're saying all the time, victory is at hand, victory is at hand. And they know they're lying. So McNamara knew they weren't going to have a victory, but they have General Westmoreland constantly, saying that they're going to win. They just need more troops. And people got sick of it. So there was a lot of unrest and things going on in the United States. And it put pressure on the politicians to do something. So they got a Vietnamization strategy they hoped would work. Don't worry, we're going to hand it off to our wonderful allies in the South, and they're going to win the war. We'll just support them. Sound familiar, right? So we're going to wash our hands of Ukraine. But don't worry, Trump says Europe will support the war if they want to keep fighting. They can tap into the 18 to 24 whatever age group and scrape them off the street, put them on the battlefield. And what good is it going to do at the end of the day? It's so complex, the history, right? The votes for federalism in that region, in Crimea and Donbass a long time ago. And in the 90s, they had these referendums and they wanted federalism, but they didn't get it. And then they were oppressed by different groups and it turned violent, and then they started fighting and all that stuff. And of course, we just have to have something to hate. We need an enemy. And the Soviet Union's gone. It might as well be Russia or China. And to keep the business going, then we need proxies. And of course, this is going to evolve to a point where the Filipinos are dying and the Japanese are dying and Australians are dying. For what? What good is it? And especially today, right? We have bigger fish to fry with the poly crisis and all that. So the troop withdrawals started in 69. They were pulling out troops bit by bit. So there was a peak of over 540,000 in 1969. And it gradually went down to 30,000 by the end of 1972, but we were still there until 75. So the strategy was working in the sense that we were getting our troops out of there and handing it off to the ARVN. So training and equipping, they trained with modern weaponry, the South Vietnamese military, transform it into a self-sufficient fighting force. This includes supplying them with helicopters, tanks, and advanced artillery. Does it sound familiar? We just pour in all the cool equipment into Ukraine, and then it just gets systematically ground down by Russian forces. It's a border war. Russia's right there. It's a huge country. They got lots of energy and materials and industrial capability. You can't, like I said in the last video from The Honest Sorcerer, you can't deindustrialize and militarize at the same time. So where is Europe going to get its industrial capacity to build up munitions for a long, protracted conventional war with Russia? And of course, it won't be conventional. It will spiral out of control and be a nightmare. It's a stupid waste of time. When I see these people giggling and laughing and patting each other on the back, and the journalist saying, "You look great in a suit, Zelensky," it just makes me sick. It's just grotesque. And I can't understand how American people can go to the football game and not do something to push back against this. But of course, Ukraine's far away and they don't really care. They're too busy hating on each other in the States. Every day another cop gets shot, mass shootings and so on. But so what? I mean, it's the news. They report bad stuff. Yeah, but compared to Europe, we don't have 480 million people in the EU, and we don't have these shootings every single freaking day. So there's a cultural problem going on in the States, I think. So the secret air and ground campaigns, while the troops were being withdrawn, the Nixon administration secretly expanded the war into neighboring Cambodia and Laos, with heavy bombing campaigns and ground incursions. This was intended to disrupt North Vietnamese supply lines, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and buy time for the Vietnamization process to work. So you look at the efforts in surrounding nations, whether it's Georgia or back in the day Chechnya or Belarus or the Balkans, the Baltic countries, and so on. The idea of bringing more and more European countries into NATO, all that expansion. And you see how this has the potential to spill over. And of course, it's all clandestine, and they've been operating on a clandestine, the U.S. has been, through its special forces and intelligence agencies, working covertly for generations. It's just nothing new. And you don't want to learn about the Maidan revolution and the complexities of all that. You just want to know that Putler's evil and Zelensky's good and go to work. Well, that's fine. But I'm just telling you, it just makes me sad that people listen to these simplistic, canned, scripted narratives from mainstream media and are not curious at all about what their leaders are doing in their name. And it's not going to help you. The tariffs aren't going to help you, and the wars aren't going to help you. And it doesn't matter if Obama's in charge, or Bush, or Biden, or Trump, or the next person. It's the same thing. It's an extension of the same policies administration after administration. 4 years fly by and you're still doing the same shit 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. So diplomatic engagement, the policy was coupled with diplomatic efforts, including negotiations with North Vietnam in Paris, and they wanted to sink that. And the dramatic opening of relations with China, that was a whole Henry Kissinger and Nixon going to China. Nixon and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger hoped that by improving ties with the Soviet Union and China, they could pressure these communist powers to reduce their support for North Vietnam. Well, now it's going to be you're Russian Orthodox, you're Russians, you're Eastern Slavs, you're Celestials, you're Chinese, you know. It just reverts back to the Western civilization racialized narratives that have been around for hundreds of years. And you just start saying, it doesn't matter if you're commie or not anymore. You're just not allowing us to be in charge of your stuff, of your business. And we can't live in a world that isn't like that. You know, it's just not possible. So we have to be at war. And by the way, that's the whole reason we have our job, because we're not working for people. They're not working for people. If they were, we'd be doing things very, very differently, because we would be trying to figure out a way to mitigate the most horrific consequences of our predicament, which is unavoidable at this point. And, we still play these the great game type of games. It just never ends. So they had some success at building up the ARVN and to prevent the fall of South Vietnam. The final collapse came in 1975, demonstrated the limits of this strategy. And look what happened in Afghanistan. Look at what happened in Iraq, and then ISIL or ISIS or the Islamic State, whatever you want to call it, came along. And now these leaders are in charge of Syria because we made it so. And everybody knows that the U.S. could tell Israel to stop the war with Hamas, and it would stop. But they want to kill everyone. They want to push all the Palestinians out of Gaza. And we don't care about that. That's fine. It suits the business model. So this horrific luxury terrorism is being perpetrated in our name, and we don't seem to give a fuck. We don't seem to care. You can subscribe to Double Down News, or you can subscribe to me or anybody, learn about these things, and then what do we do about it? You know, it's just so frustrating. But it's important to know our history and understand the patterns, the way history rhymes. So the ARVN's inherent weaknesses, despite U.S. training and equipment, it struggled with systemic problems like low morale. We see desertions all the time in Ukraine. Corruption, there's plenty of that in Ukraine. And a lack of effective leadership. Do you really think Zelensky's the guy? It's just insane. And it's unfortunate for the Ukrainian people. It breaks my heart. It was not able to handle the full-scale conventional assault from the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA. Once U.S. air and logistical support was removed, vada bing, vada boom, right? They lose. So what do you think's going to happen in Ukraine? And these idiotic bureaucrats and politicians in Europe want to keep it going. Good luck. They want a ceasefire so they can put soldiers in there. How is that going to create lasting security and peace? Now, I know we get in the weeds arguing about why it happened and whether these separatists or federalists or Russian speakers have a point or whether they have a grievance that's righteous and legal. I think, I hate to say it, but Putler is more legalistic than his Western adversaries. We don't care about rule of law. We care about a rules-based order. You know, we just do it our way and we're fine. So their combat effectiveness wasn't so good. Their ability to fight. The South Vietnamese was very much impaired for many reasons. And then there were political factors. The Watergate scandal in the US and Nixon's subsequent resignation in 1974 severely weakened the American government's ability to influence events and fulfill its promises to Saigon. This emboldened North Vietnam to launch its final offensive, knowing the U.S. was politically unable to intervene. So what do you think is going to happen with Trump and all of his stupid flailing about, his flip-flopping and his ignorance? What do you think is going to happen with, and all the little sycophants that surround him who are just careerist egomaniacs? You know, they lose the political will to support, and it's gone. It's done and dusted. I don't think that France or Germany can field the kind of army it thinks it can, or equip it. Again, industrialization and militarization go hand in hand. You need the energy resources and the material resources. And you need the will to invest all of that energy and material into war making. Really, do you think that's going to be politically feasible in the EU? I don't think so. This is all theater, and it's absurdist theater at that. It's grotesquely absurd. And I published something on Substack about Soren Kierkegaard. And, you know, it's just... this whole thing will turn anyone into a kind of depressed existentialist. Thank God I don't have the I'm not a depressive. I don't have that gene. I'm just lucky. So this goes into my feelings about this idea of Vietnamization is an example of proxy war strategy. And I'm going to end the video here. And I'll come back and talk about that in the next video. So I hope this helps you to think about things in a different way. It's very challenging to learn about all these things. It's time consuming and all that. But it's fascinating if you want to delve into it. And you can, I think maybe I'll put on my website some of the books about Vietnam that I'm reading. In case you're interested in the history of that war. Anyway, take good care. I'll talk to you soon. Bully MT, out.